Alright, YouTube, we're back, of course, talking that FF7. You already know the motherfucking drill, my dudes. Want to revisit the Dyne Barret mistranslation that we talked about here recently, and that we previously talked about one other time on the channel. I'm not trying to harp on this one specific mistranslation, but I want to kind of revisit it from the perspective of why the original line matters. We go through like the English localization for FF7 Remake and Rebirth. There's a lot of lines that are just different, and a lot of times they can change, context and the meanings of particular dialogues and scenes or whatever, right? There's probably a good amount of them out there that don't even matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, they might change what it says in the Japanese script, but it doesn't really affect anything. But clearly, with the original line that we have in Rebirth, where Barret talks to Dyne about giving a better life to his daughter that is 2 years away from being born, was just kind of stupid, as we talked about. As I've said plenty of times, I just think it's fucking stupid. It's a weird-ass oversight. I don't even know how that mistake gets made.
This is your chance to give your daughter a better life than what we have.
And with the most recent update to FF7 Rebirth, this line has been changed to, this is your chance to give the kids here a better life than what we had. Now, as we talked about with the previous video, this updated line is better than the original one, because the original one made no sense. Why are we talking about Marlene, who's not even being conceived yet? They're not even attempting to have Marlene, or Eleanor getting pregnant, or anything like that, right? That just made no damn sense. This line's a little bit better. It gives them a bit of motivation. Like, we're moving to Mako. Like, that's what Barret wants, right? We're bringing a Mako reactor into Krell to try to get everybody here, including the kids here, a better life than what we had. All that is great, and it gives you a bit of backstory on the character of Barret and why he's doing what he's doing, right? Now, with the original line, however, he says pretty much the same thing, but he's talking about his wife, Myrna. Again, the line that Barret says in Japanese is more or less the same, but you take out your daughter when he's talking to Dyne, or the most recent version, the kids here, and replace it with Myrna. He says something to the effect of, I don't want Myrna to live a difficult life anymore. That's what he says in the original Japanese script, right? And that original line, for me, works on so many other levels than just talking about Marlene. Again, makes no damn sense. And it's still good motivation to want to do it for, like, the kids of Corel, for sure, obviously. But him doing it for his wife, wanting his wife to have a better life, which is, like, besides Dyne and I guess Eleanor, the most important people in, Barret's life. I mean, I'm sure he cares about everybody in Krell overall, but you get what I mean. All we really know about Barret's family is Myrna, right? Maybe Dyne's considered kind of like a brother to him or something like that, right? But his actual immediate family, like his wife, Myrna. So you get this flashback here, and with the original dialogue, you learn that Barret wanted to do this for his wife, right? To give her a better life, switch from being a coal town to having a Mako reactor here, all that other shit. It makes all of Barret's backstory hit even harder. Especially, of course, Barret's trial scene in the Temple of the Ancients, where we actually get to see his wife. Now, with the current English localization for Rebirth, I'm not sure how many times Myrna gets mentioned. I know for sure, I think with like maybe the high intimacy date you get with Barret, that's where he mentions her. Like, at least on my playthrough, my first playthrough of the game, that's where he first mentioned Myrna's name. Now, I don't know if there's a way to get him to talk about her at other points in the game before then or after that. And I'm not sure with the original Japanese script, besides the flashback, of course, if he ever talks about her anymore. But if you have that original Japanese dialogue where he talks about wanting to bring Mako to the town of Corel for his wife, to give her a better life, it makes scenes like the trial scene hit even harder. And this is already one of the most emotional scenes in FF7 Rebirth. But imagine if we had that original line. So actually, looking at the dialogue after you do the fight scene with Dyne, Barret does mention Myrna here, but I don't know if there's any other mentions of her prior to this moment when it comes to Rebirth.
Myrna was dead, and I figured you were too.
Part of me does want to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they mention her sometime before then, because if not, then you wouldn't know who she is. Like, he mentions Myrna here. This is maybe, in the English version, the first time he mentions her, maybe. And really, it might be the first time they mention her at all when it comes to the Remake trilogy thus far, at least in English, because I know for sure he never talks about her in Remake, unless I am just somehow misremembering the shit. And I'm currently playing through, and I've been playing through Remake again on PS5. I've never heard him say anything about her, and it's been a little bit since I played through Rebirth, so I can't, remember every little thing. And I've only played through Rebirth like twice, so maybe there's like some dialogue I'm not remembering right now. I actually kind of forgot that he mentions her during the Dyne scene, so it's possible. I will say, though, Barret is on my team 100% of the time in Remake and Rebirth where it's allowed, right? Obviously, you're forced to use particular party members here and there, but when I have the option to build my own party, Barret is my party 100% of the time. So if there was like some optional dialogue where he maybe talks about his wife, I either didn't get that or I'm just misremembering that. The point is, you can't really talk about Barret's wife enough, because that is the main motivation for what happens with the Krell tragedy whenever Shinra kills everybody, right? Is he was doing it all for his wife. That's also part of why I mentioned the original line in Japanese working on multiple levels compared to the current line that we have, this new line, right? Is because not only was it motivation for the character of Barret, who's doing it for his wife, but also it's just more mention of him having a wife, because why would we not want that? I can't begin to understand why the localization team would not want to have another mention of Barret's wife. I did have somebody mention in the previous video that it was potentially kind of a weird way to try to convince Dine to take on Mako, and now that I've thought about it the last few days, I kind of can agree a little bit, even though I do like him mentioning his wife. Like, trying to convince Dine that we should do Mako because I want my wife to have a better life. Like, I can understand why that's kind of a weird, maybe sentence or something like that. Like, it sort of sounds selfish, right? Even though we know that's not what Barret means by this, but it just sounds like, let's bring a Mako reactor into town so that my wife and me can have a better life, right? Like, it just sounds like that. If you can maybe interpret it that way, potentially. Even though we know that's not the intent by, like, Nojima and the devs making the game. Like, they wouldn't want Barret to be a selfish person. He's obviously not. He's a very selfless person, actually. But if they wanted to change the line from that, for whatever reason, that you could have had Barret just say, like, why not let's bring a Mako reactor into town to give our wives a better life. Let's get that, like, first mention of Eleanor and Myrna. I mean, again, I'm not entirely sure if, Eleanor's mentioned anytime before this moment or this flashback we're talking about. But if this would be the first time mentioning that both of these guys have a wife, that's important because you're setting that up, right? These two have a wife. This is what you learn not too long after this moment hit even harder, because you learn about the destruction of Corel. And if you set up kind of earlier in the story that they both have a wife, clearly, I think at this point, Barret's never even talked about having a wife. So if you say in this moment, let's have a better life for our wives, it's like, oh shit, Barret has a wife. How have we never heard of that? And as a player, you can probably kind of understand that she was probably killed at some point. Otherwise, why has Barret never talked about her up to this point in the story, right? You don't know quite yet that it's, technically his fault. Obviously, Shinra is the ones to fucking blame here for the destruction of Corel. It's not actually Barret, but he is the one to try to, introduce Shinra into the town of Corel, so that's why everybody blames him, that's why he blames himself. So while I am a huge advocate for that original Japanese line where Barret talks about his wife, I do think you probably could have even done the original line a little bit better where he just mentions doing it for our wives, because it is slightly kind of weird to, like, just say my wife. Like, I want to do this for my wife only. Like, that does sound a little bit selfish, right? So maybe you could have Barret say, like, I want our wives to have a better life, essentially. Then again, if we're going down that rabbit hole, there is, like, a bunch of people from the town of Corel in there when they're, like, talking with Scarlet and shit. So maybe you just, let's do this for our wives. Even that sounds selfish. Like, maybe you should have just said, let's do it for all of Corel. I don't know. Regardless, the original Japanese line is Barret saying that he wants to do this for his wife, to give her a better life, right? And that is necessary backstory and necessary motivation and context for the character of Barret and his overall beef with the company of Shinra. Came in and killed the majority of people from the town of Corel, right? And they wiped out his home village. That's enough motivation, of course. But also they killed his wife. And specifically, he was wanting to do this. He was introducing Shinra to his town for his wife, to give her a better life. And that got her killed. That's why, to me, the original line is so much more important than the mention of Marlene, which, again, say with me, makes no damn sense, or the new line where you're just doing it for the kids of Corel, which is still a good motivation, but it's not as good. Speaking of those original lines, I want to clarify a few things, because some people have said, translating from Japanese to English is difficult, and I get that to a certain degree, but that's not what this is, right? This isn't them, like, struggling to figure out what's said in Japanese and, like, translate it properly to English where it makes sense for an English-speaking audience, right? They say exactly the goddamn same thing. It's just they change Myrna to your daughter, which makes no sense. People have also tried to use the argument that, like, they're trying to match, to some degree, I guess, what they're saying in Japanese, like with the lips, and trying to, like, say something in English that I guess kind of resembles that, but that's not even a thing. Because with Remake and Rebirth, they use, like, AI to match, like, lip syncing for at least English. I'm not sure about other languages, but for sure with English, right? So in that scene when Barret, says, give your daughter a better future than what we had, or Myrna, or these kids, whatever. Like, they could have had Barret say literally anything, and the lips would have matched. So that's not what it is. So I guess kind of like a TLDR, like, I think it's important for me as a player, but also for the character of Barret, to know that he was doing this for his wife, right? Essentially, it would seem like the only family in his life. We don't ever hear about anybody else from Barret's family ever in all of FF7, as far as I'm aware, except for his wife, right? Why they would change the line, I just don't understand it, especially when the line they give us in Rebirth, both the lines, I guess, at this point, are essentially the same thing. Like, there's pretty much the exact same line. You're just swapping out Barret's wife for your daughter or the kids here or whatever, right? Like, they're essentially the exact same, so I just don't understand why you'd kind of, like, erase, like, Barret's wife. It's just strange to me. And look, I'm sure we could do this with a lot of the other translations out there, the mistranslations, right? This is just one of them. We talked about this shit for like 10 plus minutes at this point, right? You can kind of see why like stuff like this is a problem for a lot of players out there, including myself. When you take like certain lines and you change them and completely change like the context or the meaning or what the original intent was with like the Japanese script, you can see why people complain. But of course, that's where I want to pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this with this particular translation? I know there's plenty of them out there we could talk about or complain about or whatever, but with this particular one, changing it from Barret's motivation being his wife, Myrna, bringing Mako into the town of Corel for his wife, to Diane's future daughter, which you don't know about, but then changing it now to like the kids of Corel. Like, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think is like the better line, I suppose? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to you guys new, so notes in the description below. Follow me with Furda-YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.